All right, guys, so we're gonna try something here. It's the Hecht Report.
Yeah, okay.
So
Wow.
once a month, Michael is gonna come here and we're gonna, your report on the state of New Orleans.
State of New Orleans.
This is Hecht Report number 1.
All right.
What I
That's fine.
think today we're gonna attempt to talk about is the state of the ecosystem of entrepreneurship. Framing that the ecosystem has taken years to build. There's been organizations in place. We've had success, and now there's some money coming out. And so there's some conditions are set. So what we'd love to do is talk about your insights and perspective. One is on those 3 things: where we've come, what we're doing, what's out in front, and then let's go deeper. Where we can ask some questions about what's going on. And ultimately, at the end of this, how do we get the answers out to the entrepreneurs to catalyze more entrepreneurs starting businesses?
Perfect. Good.
So, Michael, welcome.
Thank
Welcome
you.
to your show.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow. So I think so entrepreneurship. And Tim and I have been talking a lot about this over the past few months now, really. So pre Katrina and back when you started Idea Village, entrepreneurship wasn't a thing. It wasn't. I think it was not only not considered cool. I think it was considered a threat. There's a fascinating article that came out in the Times a few weeks ago and I can send it to you, by Thomas Edsall, called "The Hidden Reason Why Cities Fail."
Yeah.
And I don't know if any already reread it.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And it basically says that when cities lose their business elite because like banks get consolidated and they lose their headquarters, then cities lose those people that have the financial stroke that's aligned with their business interests, but it's also aligned with the interests of the city, and then politicians run amok. And so it talks about Baltimore, St. Louis, Cleveland. It could have easily just talked about New Orleans that used to have all these headquarters, and either they went to Houston because they weren't allowed in the right clubs here, or they got consolidated, like recently happened with Iberia. And I think there's a great point to that. But he said the business elite were incredibly important in doing like what King Milling did after Katrina, where he got really involved in coastal restoration. One, because he cared, but also because his bank was here, and his house is here. But he said the flip side of that is that the same business elite tended to be very conservative and tended to not have the imagination or the incentive to want to invest in new things that would disrupt where they're making their money. And so he specifically talks about Cleveland that invested a lot of money in reinforcing the status quo.
Yeah.
And he actually contrasts it with Pittsburgh. That says the only city that really escaped this because the business elite was replaced by a research elite led by Carnegie and Pitt. It doesn't really explain exactly how that happened, but anyway, so it's fascinating. But the point is that I think entrepreneurship was not cool and probably not seen as being aligned with a lot of the interests pre-Katrina. Post-Katrina, that all changed because necessity is the mother of invention. And I think it was the post-Katrina psychosocial change that we were all part of, combined with the groundwork that you and Robbie and others had started with Idea Village, that created this environment where we could have the IP building and have kind of
What's the IP building? Explain that.
And the IP building was almost, in some ways, a precursor to New Society. It was the first physical space that really we opened up, Idea Village and GNO Inc. back in 2008, I guess, to create a physical hub for entrepreneurship in order to create serendipity and in order to create kind of a physical and symbolic home for entrepreneurship. And there was a bar there, Bienville Salema, and
Turbo Squid, ICs, Launchpad, 4.0 schools.
Right.
It was all hanging out at the Cocktail Bar every night.
Exactly, right. And Idea Village eventually was there as well. So that kind of went along, and then I remember there was a period, and it might have been around like 2015, 2016, where people were starting saying, hey, that whole thing about New Orleans being on the cover of Entrepreneur magazine, it feels like it's kind of petered out. And we're like, no, there are all these companies that are in the pipeline. And in fact, it was kind of the calm before the storm, because then we had the storm of M&A activity, which I guess happened in the 2018, 2019, like right before COVID, when we saw, I think, a total of about $2 billion worth of exits. Led
Locally.
right. Led by Lucid and Level Set, but many others. And then what's happened since then is we kind of went to sleep for a few years with COVID, and I think we've come out of that, and I think it feels like, to some degree, the incredible momentum that we had coming out of that feels a little bit in stasis right now. Not stalled as much as just lacking cohesion. And I think part of that is because we're all kind of stunned coming out of COVID. It's because M&A activity, just slowed down. But I kind of feel like right now we're in a point where our community here needs a new narrative, a new attempt at kind of cohesion, and something to spark it. Now, what you and a lot of other people have pointed out, that to get to the last thing, the spark should be this $100 million of SSBCI money that comes down from the state. So SSBCI stands for, and I always call it the super secret business cash infusion. It was one of these bizarre programs that the Fed had set up years ago that was basically meant to spur entrepreneurship, but basically it was just going right to commercial banks and was doing nothing to change their behavior. It was just basically, padding their balance sheet because it was basically free money from the Treasury.
Federal money to state.
Right. And we went to the Treasury and said, hey, is it possible to use this money to set up evergreen funds that can invest in startups? And we were able to basically convince Treasury that it wasn't illegal. And eventually we were able to get a portion of those SSBCI funds designated for nonprofit evergreen funds nationally, but we did it in Louisiana. That led to the formation of the startup fund, and maybe about like 5 other funds in Louisiana. And the startup fund ended up being under Jimmy Russell. We were able to convince the state and then the feds that we wanted to do this again. So now the hunk of money that's coming down is a lot bigger. I think it's $107 million.
Well, I think it's 90 million, but it has to be matched, right?
Well, yeah, there's 90 million. That has to be matched, right? So it's 90 million of federal dollars coming down. So roughly 100 million. And the match is actually not a match. The match is you basically have to show that in the lifetime of the company that it's being leveraged for that much money or more. So you end up blowing the match out of the water because these funds go in early. And so you end up getting matches that I think like for the startup fund ended up being like 56x or something because...
They don't have to privately match it with funds?
No, the way we're able to show is that as long as the match came in over the lifetime of the company, that it counted. We're gonna have $100 million of capital. And most of the companies, organizations that got the capital are in the greater New Orleans area. So as a catalyst, that hunk of capital feels like it's the most basic kind of fuel that we could bring to the fire.
So that's like Ida Village, Propeller, Auctioner,
Tulane, GNO Inc.
So it's a nice,
but it's a nice
diverse portfolio of funders,
And so now I guess the question for tonight and for everybody here is, to me, there's 2 questions, or really 3 questions. One was a narrative question. What is the narrative that we want to restart and begin to project out to the outside world? And that's through social media and earned media. What's the New Orleans story that we were telling so well post-Katrina? And to be honest, led by the mayor, who was kind of such an eloquent spokesperson for New Orleans as America's greatest laboratory for innovation. Those were his words, but spoke directly to entrepreneurship. What's the narrative we want to get out there? The second is organizationally, what is the ecosystem? What do we need to do now? New Society is definitely part of that story of how we try to bring people together to create cohesion and support and serendipity. And then the third thing is, and this is kind of more the GNO Inc. question, is what are the challenges that we still have in the state that we have to mitigate in order to allow entrepreneurship to work better here, the things beyond money, whether it's policy issues. We've done stuff, for example, we were able to address some sales tax issues, small technical issues, but that we're taxing tech companies at the highest rate. I guess what I'd love to hear from folks is just, if we're here today and we think that we're out of COVID, we have a hunk of capital coming in, we've got new assets like New Society, what do we need to be doing in terms of narrative and in terms of policy to get into this next period of excitement and where people want to start companies, where the companies that have started become successful? Kind of what are our marching orders for the next 3 to 5 years? What are those most important things that we should be thinking about fixing? And what are those most important messages that we should be promoting to help make this thing work?
And two sort of clarifying pieces of this, is it correct? I think in the funding, there's a 2026 allocation date. Isn't there a certain date where they have to allocate it? So there's a timing pressure.
Yeah, there's timing pressure, right?
So when this money does come down, assuming it's relatively soon, that's 2 to 3 years of an intense amount of money. And secondarily, we have never had that amount of money in this community dedicated to this region.
Yep.
We need more entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I mean,
now it's game on.
I don't think the quality deal flow is there.
So that's the opportunity. Is how do we encourage more people to take a shot, to start new companies and go for it? So I guess with that, questions, thoughts, let's roll.
So I got it. I ran the Blue House down the street for many years.
Yeah, I love Blue
We
House.
did great work with folks who had never even thought about being an entrepreneur.
Right.
And in the last 2 years, I've run a philanthropist group every Sunday at Petit Clouet in the Bywater with people who have moved to New Orleans post-COVID with a lot of capital. What I see New Orleans and the entire region really standing out as a place to develop businesses with a social impact mission, double bottom line businesses. We are a community that has had more nonprofits started around here. We have had thought leaders come from major institutions, MIT, Harvard, people I work with every single day. The smartest people in New Orleans that I'm meeting every day are the people who really care about making a social impact.
Right.
That doesn't mean that they don't care about making profits. And so I've started a startup that has a double bottom line, and I'm going to go in front of Jimmy Brussel and work with us. But what I'm seeing is to get that caliber of thought leadership and that intensity of purpose that you need to make a $1 billion, $1 trillion company, you have to have that level of caring. And we have a very unique opportunity to create an entire economy that not only uplifts our region, but also builds an economy around doing good. And every CEO that I know that come to New Orleans for Jazz Fest, and when I give the same exact talk to them, they hear it and they want to invest in these type of companies. So my question and my answer,
I have a question too.
is like, how can we transition from a city that relied on nonprofits and really did a lot to build nonprofits to a city that goes into a B Corp reality.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so I think that some of this, one, I agree with you completely. Like the give a shitness quotient in New Orleans is way higher than most other places. And the relationship to the people and the terroir, I mean, this is a place where people just care a lot more. I mean, we all know that. That's why we're here. And all you have to do is spend 2 days in Boston or Austin, or I was in San Francisco a few weeks ago, and it leaves you cold, right? It's technically very proficient, but not there. So I agree with you. So I think that's an interesting place to talk about it. And it feels like that's a university opportunity, whether it's at Loyola or Tulane or UNO, where that becomes a selling point and it attracts students that are really looking to get in that.
Tulane's recently started an innovation unit, right? And I know, Evan, what's Tulane done? They've done.
Yeah, I mean, in short, the Innovation Institute that you're alluding to is kind of just hitting its year mark, and they're still in the process of building out their team. But I mean, to the point that was made earlier, they're going to have pretty sizable fund to be able to invest in kind of like pre-Series A sort of this, what they're referring like this gap funding initiative to help with on the commercialization front. That's primarily going to be focused kind of in the life sciences.
Right.
but that's not to say that that there won't be emphasis or focus elsewhere. So that's kind of just in, I'd still, like, they're still very much kind of a startup.
Yep.
And speak to that, Michael. It seems like, over the years, now that Tulane's getting involved in a heavy way with entrepreneurship, UNO, and we're practicing with the beach.
Yeah.
And Loyola's got a program, and the $1 billion investment within downtown and wind. What are the other things that you're seeing that's going to be spurring innovation?
So if I had to kind of go through in order what I'm most excited about, definitely the one that I think has the greatest broad potential right now for the whole state is, I was just in Denmark past few days, invited by the Danish government, meeting with their energy companies, particularly in wind and green hydrogen and P2X, which is basically when you make something like hydrogen and then you figure a way to store it in methanol or ammonia. And I think that right now Louisiana is positioned to be this all of the above clean energy state of the future, which would include cleaner oil, cleaner natural gas, offshore wind, particularly manufacture of offshore wind, carbon capture, use and sequestration, including direct air, biofuels, which we have a ton of stuff going on in biofuels, battery manufacture like Advano. So we're not going to do EVs, but we're going to do batteries. Solar manufacture. I'm not interested in the solar farms, but the manufacture of the panels. What that means is we're taking all of our expertise and assets for being an energy state in fossil fuels for the past however many decades and translating that into these lower carbon applications that still use a lot of the assets and ingenuity. And there's going to be a ton of innovation.
In the blue economy, blue technology stuff, and as another sector that we can be talking about, none of this is going to matter if we don't have any dry land 50 years from now.
Right.
So we have to deal with that. So speaking of Tulane, there's the new coastal and river engineering department that they're starting to build that out as well. And in terms of entrepreneurship, there's tremendous opportunities there. So UNO is obviously focusing on some of this, and they're in a good position in terms of some of the engineering and all that. So I think that in terms of where some of this money goes and how we can be employing people in all the bayou parishes and creating, talking about building a narrative of what we are in the future, and that we're the global center for these solution sets, and already competing with Deltaris and the Dutch and all that kind of
But
thing.
I'd say the challenge is, and so we've been dealing with this whole saltwater wedge thing, which was like a massive emergency until it wasn't. Like it's like oh wait, it's
That was last season.
Yeah.
A new season of the show.
Yeah, but if we had Israeli reverse osmosis technologies, there wouldn't be a problem.
right. Well, that's true. But here's the issue. I agree with you. So the issue is that our river is not a real river, right? It's an engineered canal, right? If we had a real river, it'd be going through Morgan City right now, and we'd have like the equivalent of what they have in like San Antonio or LA, because that's what the river wants to do. So the Army Corps maintains it, but all the money goes through the Army Corps effectively. And so when you get these massive projects, whether it's the dredging or the Mid-Barataria diversion or what we're going to do with Neptune Pass, which is now taking between 20 and 30% of the river. In my experience in Louisiana, in terms of river hydrology issues and coastal restoration issues, because of the amount of monies involved and because of the government involvement, it's been difficult to get entrepreneurship involved in it. Or even like the BP spill. People had all these innovative ways to deal with the spill, but they had trouble getting into the process because of the bureaucracy and the politics and the amount of money involved. And so I agree with you, the opportunity is vast. What is not as clear to me is how to break the stranglehold of the bureaucracy on those monies and how they're spent. So it's kind of a sidebar issue, but we do have to figure out how to change the rules and change the politics so that innovations are allowed to be trialed on a pilot basis in terms of dealing with the river and dealing with the coast. Right now, CPRA, even something like the Water Institute, those are very much of the establishment, right? And it's not a criticism, it's kind of just an observation.
Right, but like I know Bo Jones is thinking about when the Water Institute does these projects, they have a culture of innovation and entrepreneurship, they learned a bunch of things during the project, and then their engineers want to see those learnings go into entrepreneurship. I know you've been hearing about Build SOS, that's another one that's a neat opportunity. So there's a wide range of technologies and companies that are all things that are not only going to help us save our own ass, but they're all exportable, and they're going to be in the next 50 to 100 years, and that sector, there's no limit on the growth of that sector, and there's no reason we can't be leading.
No, we're built on the youngest populated deltaic plain in the world. So whatever happens here first, it can happen everywhere else. And the thing that got us turned on to this years ago was when we learned that the Dutch drive about 4% of their GDP through the blue economy. So it's a major thing, and our conditions are much more dynamic than what the Dutch have to deal with, because we got water coming up and land going down. So we're like Luke Skywalker in Star Wars.
We have a couple folks here with the film business.
Yep.
So in film and new media, is that an opportunity? I mean, from our state, it used to have a great incentives for the film business.
Yeah, so I think it's not just film. It's now that we're having this confluence of all of the digital arts coming together, right? And so it's film and it's software and video games, all coming together. We're doing well in that. We've been helped by COVID because of all the need for content. We've got the best incentives in North America. We're currently pitching to a couple of companies that if they come here from California will be absolute game changers. There's more opportunity in New Orleans than there's been since Katrina. And just to kind of answer your question,
Since before 2000.
Because we're going to build this new $2 billion port downriver. We're crushing it on energy to the point that the Danes are flying us over to meet with them. We're building the world's largest rocket and largest windmill blades down at Michoud. In tech, we continue to grow, and we're like top 5 in the country for African Americans and women in tech. Bio continues to grow really strong. Film, along with tech, going really well. Hospitality, we're back to 2019 levels. The biggest problem with the airport is that it's too small. Remote work should be a huge boon for us because, if you can get a San Francisco salary but live, in Bayou St. John, you're living your best life. So all that stuff is like completely, or is mostly true, right? But on the other hand, this place has never been in a pissier mood since I've been back, right? Because of crime, because of general kind of infrastructure disrepair, and frankly, because of the lack of positive narrative coming out of local leadership. Yeah. We're in this moment where we're kind of playing both sides of the ball, and the defense stuff, we know what we have to do. And look, it's working because of things like the NOLA Coalition. Crime is doing better. Our murder rate's down about 20%. We've stopped the loss of police officers. I think we're actually improving at twice the rate of most of the country. On the positive side, it's where I'm kind of trying to figure out how we create these narratives and create these physical spaces, as well as these kind of emotional spaces that say we're back on the upswing. And hopefully what we can do is, between the money that's coming in and then creating some narrative strings, which could be around, double bottom lines, could be around the blue economy, could be around the creative arts, where we begin to tell our story to, the Forbes online and the Inks, and we get a something placed in the journal, and begin to get that sense that something is chugging along here again. It's that narrative momentum that I think I really want to reestablish, and it just feels like right now the parts are there, but they're not in a coherent, they're not in a cogent whole.
What's your recommendation for people to plug in? So if indeed there's an ecosystem, if indeed there's money, what would you say to somebody who, okay, how do I access this? How do you get involved? How do you plug in?
Well, I think you just described what GNO Inc. has to do now that we're kind of taking on this role.
I think for me it's been easy just in terms of coming here, right? Talking to you and getting the knowledge and that information of, hey, from this, go over here, hey, talk to this person, come back. And I think New Orleans is special because, and I've gone to Silicon Valley and I tried to do the same and break into those networks, and it's nearly impossible.
Yeah.
And on top of that, it really kind of breaks down your spirit. So being in a place that is very offering of help if you do need it,
right,
if you do want it. To your point, Lindsay always says, just show up, and that's really what you have to do. You just show up. I think the bigger question is how do you spread the word about environments like this for someone who's not necessarily specifically looking for something, right? So I came to you saying, hey, I'm fundraising in this period of time, going through the motions of it, I need something specifically here. But I know, just thinking back, I wish I would have come maybe 2 years ago, right? A year ago, when I wasn't at this place, just to meet everyone and to build out those networks. And so I think that's the kind of harder lever of how do you bring people in prior to when they need something, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's okay, that kind of confirms in our thesis, which is that we need an engine that's pushing out this content and pushing out this information and pushing out this propaganda so that people are receiving it before they even know that they need it. We just have to put a concerted effort behind consolidating this information, getting it out via traditional and social media, creating physical spaces like new, and then events. We've done a pretty good job of it. We're beginning to with music. We have this initiative Metronome, which is about building a real music industry in New Orleans. So it's not just live performance, but it's all of the underpinnings of it, which is really where you make your money. So it happens here and not Nashville.
How do we show people all the resources and how it works?
Yeah.
They don't understand how it all works.
A small part of it you can accomplish passively by having the website that we're gonna, building out Startup NOLA to a new level and all that, the passive stuff. But I think a lot of it happens personally, and that's, again, it's why we did IP building, now a long time ago, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's why this place matters, because there's nothing's more efficient than walking into a place and meeting somebody and that person say, oh, talk to them. We suffer from the challenge that a lot of it gets back to that why cities fail thing. We're challenged on the critical mass size, right? Because we just don't have because we started losing the critical mass of companies back in the 80s and really in the 60s. Now people tend to Tulane is number one in the country, or it was, for students coming in from outside of the state, and number one in the country for students leaving. It's basically like semester at sea, right? And that's because it has excellent training technically, but people didn't think there's enough job opportunity here. And of course, there's a path dependency to that. I mean, something's got to catalyze it, like Bill Gates catalyzed Seattle when he went home there instead of being in Albuquerque because he didn't want to go back and be by his folks. So we need those catalytic companies to create the opportunity.
So how do we connect those entrepreneurs back into the new entrepreneurs? Say, here's how you do it in New Orleans.
So basically, we've committed now at GNO Inc. to kind of build out this function that's going to really serve to coordinate, promote the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And so I really need New Society, maybe you guys as an inaugural group, to help workshop that. What does the content look like? I'm less worried about the coordination. I mean, I kind of have a better sense of that, but make sure that we're not excluding anybody who should be part of this. But anyway, I'd love to use this group, or no, not love to. We need to use this group, and we will, obviously.
All right. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you. Live from the Hecht Report. Thank you.